So without further ado, I'm going to introduce ShoreNI. For those of you who've never heard of ShoreNI before, it is a citizen science program that was being run by Ulster Wildlife a few years ago. I've been in post since October 2023, and it's now my ambition to kick ShoreNI back off again. Um, ShoreNI is a project that is hosted on a program called iNaturalist, and it aims to get the public involved in taking some species and habitats data and making that available and uploading that onto iNaturalist and getting people out into nature and onto our rocky shoreline. So I have put the title of beginner training on my talk here, and it is my intention that hopefully by the end of my talk, you'll be really motivated to go out and start recording some marine species for yourselves. We'll be putting on some further training as well, so some classroom training and then some events out onto the shore as well to hone your ID skills if you feel like you would like to get involved with ShoreNI down the road. I mentioned before that ShoreNI was being done a few years ago. So you may have seen a talk similar to this, or you may have heard of ShoreNI before. We had a lot of really great volunteers and observers. And we'll take a wee look at iNaturalist later and see just how many observations we have and how many observers we have to date. Because the whole reason for ShoreNI was that it was supposed to be a bit self-sustaining. So iNaturalist still has a good range of observers that are still putting in lots of ID. Lots of species even today. I think the most recent ones I'd seen was yesterday, so that is really good. But we just want to build up momentum and get even more species recorded. So why should we record? I'm going to ask actually a little poll first. If we'll bring it up, I'm aware that not everybody on the call may have done this before, but I'll ask a little poll whether anybody has actually recorded species before. So let me see if I can. Yeah, there we go. So have you ever recorded any animal sightings before? So this can be terrestrial, marine, avian. But yeah, getting all the polls in there. Oh, great. Okay, so we've got 63% yes and only 37% or 40, well, 60-40. Yeah, about 60-40. So that's great. Okay, so we've got some people obviously familiar with it. So we've got a few different ways that people can record. So you may never have heard of iNaturalist before, but there's other recording sites that you can use. So there's iRecord, and then people can upload straight to the CEDAR website. And then there's lots of other different types of citizen science projects out there. So there's obviously there's things called the Irish Whale and Dolphin Group. So they upload sightings of cetaceans and dolphins around Northern Ireland and Ireland. So they have their own site to upload the sightings on there. And then there's the National Biodiversity Data Centre as well. And that is the down south, so they have their own way of uploading their species data there as well. So it's good to see that we have a bit of a 60-40 split here, so you'll know what I'm familiar with what I'm talking about here. So there's a few different reasons as to why we should be recording these species. So one of them is to fill knowledge gaps. So DAERA, who are the Department of Agriculture, Environment and Rural Affairs, are mostly monitored within our marine protected areas around Northern Ireland. So there's obviously gaps everywhere else that we as the public can help to fill, and this can even help with then designating new marine protected areas. Another reason is sometimes it's unclear as to whether some species are rare or they're just under-recorded. So filling these gaps with citizen science is really, really key to figuring out figuring this out, whether they're rare or just under-recorded. Like I said, this filling these gaps and finding out whether these species are rare or just under-recorded can help identify further sites that might need protecting. So citizen science and the ShoreNI project before had actually helped to identify some previously unknown seagrass habitats. And this is obviously great data to feed into DERA whenever they're thinking about allocating and designating new marine protected areas. Another big issue that we're also facing is obviously climate change. And one of the ways that we can keep an eye on this is through climate change indicator species. So with warming seas, we're starting to see creatures that are from a hotter, warmer water climate edging their way northwards. So by doing the citizen science and by getting out there on the shoreline, we can keep an eye on these changes and see if we're getting more and more of these climate change indicator species. Invasive species again, so invasive species can be some of these climate change indicator species, or they can be pure invaders from very, very different climes. So one of the most common ones are the Chinese mitten crabs, and they come through shipping. You get them in ballast water. So they come through ports, and that's how they end up in our waters. So it's not necessarily to do with climate change and warming seas, but just to do with transportation and that movement of water. And also recording obviously contributes to conservation. So if we see that certain species are declining, we can try and figure out why, whether that's to do with climate change, maybe it's to do with pollution incidents, but it's just really key in trying to obviously conserve these species for the future. So I mentioned marine protected areas. I'm a bit biased in that's my day-to-day. As the marine engagement officer, it's my job to try and steward or foster better stewardship of our marine protected areas around Northern Ireland. So this is a little map of all of our marine protected areas around Northern Ireland. We have 48 of them, and they cover 38% of our inshore waters. So these are designated for a whole range of different species and habitats, most of which are supposed to be monitored by DERA. But as you can see, there are some gaps there, and there's definitely not enough manpower to be managing and observing all this part of the coastline. So having citizen science is really, really valuable in order to monitor the species that these places have been designated for and to see if there's been any changes. So I mentioned there that recording is really good for indicators of climate change. So as seas warm, we're seeing a shift in the distribution of some marine species. Southern species are extending their range northwards. More northern species that are adapted for cold water are being replaced by southern species. And then volunteer recording will help us monitor these changes in Northern Ireland. So one of the examples of these species is a top shell called a thick-lipped top shell. So we can see from this little map the spread of this southern species. So the orange spots here are where they were pre-2000, and the yellow spots here are post-2000. So we can see that they're sort of moving northward with a strange little dot at Portrush at the top. So it's interesting, they're sort of enveloping and going round and ending up round the east coast of Northern Ireland. So we see that with a few different species, but I thought I'd show you this one. My next one, and we've talked about this, is invasive species. So I've got two different species of oyster here. The longer one on my left is a Pacific oyster, and the one on my right is a native oyster. And native oysters were thought to be all but extinct in Northern Ireland, but we found a population of them in Belfast Lough, and that's what's led to a lot of the work that we now do as part of the marine recovery team in Ulster Wildlife is trying to re-establish the native oyster in Belfast or in around Northern Ireland. So we've got our four nurseries that we're currently working on. But the Pacific oyster on my left here is a really big invasive species and competes for space and habitat from the native oyster. They have really big problems with this oyster in the south of England. They've been seen to take over a lot of the intertidal habitats, and you can see from this picture just how pervasive they can be. So this is all Pacific oyster. There's actually been projects in the south of England to try and eradicate these, but you can see that they're just absolutely everywhere. And if we're not careful, this is how some of our shores could end up. So by doing some citizen science and trying to figure out where they are, we can try and help conserve our native oyster and try to track where the Pacific oysters are coming from and where they are around Northern Ireland. So I'm going to do a bit of a whistle-stop tour of rocky shores. So the ShoreNI focuses mainly on rocky shore habitats. They're thought to be sort of the only habitats that are kind of untouched by human activity, mainly just because of the substrate. So trying to dredge or do any other type of development on them is very hard. And so they're kind of the last natural habitat that we have around the coast. Um, so I'm going to give a bit of a whistle-stop tour, some of the species that we see on the shore, what you could expect to see, and then I'm going to take you through the iNaturalist app so that maybe you could try your hand at taking some photos and uploading some of your records yourself the next time you're out on the shore. So this is what a typical fake shore looks like, but it shows the banding that occurs on a typical rocky shore intertidal habitat. So you've got the subtidal zone, which is mostly covered by water at all times, except for very high or very low tides. You've got the lower shore, which is exposed some of the time. You've got the middle shore, which is exposed for a higher percentage of the time. Upper shore, and then the splash zone, which doesn't necessarily get covered with water, but just has the splash from the waves and from the tides. Um, so as a result of this, obviously being exposed to the air, the different areas of the or zones of the intertidal makes for different habitat types and different suitable habitat types for all of these different types of creatures. So the higher up on the shore you are, the more adapted you have to be able to survive out of the water for longer and to be able to survive desiccation, so to live without moisture, to live without the water. Um, so a typical rocky shore in NI, we're going to Groomsport here. So this is just our Groomsport. You can see Kilroot Power Station on the other side of the loch there. And we're going to start at the upper shore. So or sorry, start at the splash zone. So the splash zone is made up of mostly these guys. So these are lichen. You get them in a few different types. So these are yellow foliose lichen, sea ivory, and crab eye lichen. So very interesting organisms. They're basically a mixture between a plant and a fungi. The plant part of the what's called the thallus, so the sort of fluffy part of this that you can see is the main body of the lichen. And the plant part of the lichen photosynthesizes. So it photosynthesizes just like plants on in terrestrial. And this produces the energy for the fungal part of the creature or part of the organism. So it's really interesting sort of symbiotic relationship here. And then they produce these very different types of lichen. And it's up on these splash zones that you can see them. So there's a few different types here. We've got our sort of leafy encrusting algae, which is the yellow foliose lichen. We've got our encrusting granular lichen, which is the crab-eye lichen, and then you've got your sort of tall tufted lichen, which is the sea ivory. So keep an eye out for those. One of the other things that you see on the splash zone, if you're looking under boulders, is our Gammarus. So this is the species Gammarus dubeni celticus. So this is our native species. There's another species called Gammarus pulex, which is an invasive species. But from the naked eye, it'd probably be quite hard to tell them apart. But they're usually very, very numerous on the upper shore. If you turn them over, you turn rocks over, boulders over on the splash zone here. You see hundreds of them probably under the rock. You've probably seen them yourself if you've kicked over any boulders. They sort of scatter away. Freshwater shrimp is a bit of a misnomer here. They're found in a lot of different salinities, so everything from freshwater to marine. So they're quite ubiquitous species. So moving on, we've got the upper shore. So the upper shores so it gets covered with water probably in very, very high tides. So it lends itself to be able to have a higher biodiversity of creatures and plants. So the first thing we'll talk about is seaweeds. So this is just the general anatomy, I guess, of seaweed. So you've got the frond, which is the big leafy bit. You got the holdfast down at the bottom there, which is to keep it anchored onto the rocks and onto the seabed. You've got the stipe, which is the middle part of the stem, basically, of the seaweed, from which the fronds then grow off. You've got gas bladders, which, as it's a plant, it helps it float onto the surface. You've got the blade, part of the frond, and then you've got the midrib as well. So these are all different ways that we can tell apart the different seaweeds. So these are the different things that we use to tell the difference between the species of seaweeds. So first one we got here, this is channeled rack, Pelvetia canalculata. And you can see from this picture here that it's very well adapted to the upper shore. So it is sort of curled in on itself. And this helps it maintain water, maintain moisture whenever it's exposed to the air for this long length of times, for the longest length of time on this upper shore. So it's very, very well adapted, and this is where you'll find it most often is on the upper shore. As I should have mentioned is that as you get further up the shore, you have to get better adapted, but there's less competition the further you get up the shore because less things are that well adapted to staying out of or being out of the water. So that's been the sacrifice here is they're really well adapted, but they have to deal with being out of the water for a really long time. But these are really quite easy to realize what they are just from the shape of them. This one here is called a spiral rack, so Fucus spiralis. And again, the sort of spiral nature of these means that it retains a bit of moisture on the upper shore, but not quite as well as the channeled rack. Another creature that we find on the upper shore are rough periwinkles. So you've maybe heard of the term periwinkle before. We get a lot of different types and different species of them, but this is a very common one that you'll find on the upper shore in the crevices and cracks of boulders on the upper shore. Very, very small, so only up to zero point 0.8 of a centimeter, and a lot rougher to the touch than their cousins that I'll talk about later, which is the edible periwinkles, and edible periwinkles are a lot bigger. So you can see here they come in all lots of different colors and sizes, but that's typically how you would find them on the upper shore. Next one on the upper shore, and probably nearly all the way down to the lower shore as well, but they are well adapted again for the upper shore, are barnacles. So again, we get lots of different species of barnacles. Um, these ones are up to 15 millimeters across, so they're um, yeah, 15 millimeters across, got their six shell plates and a diamond shape opening. Um, so I'm gonna ask another little question here, ask another little poll. Um, Yeah, so my question is, which creature do you think a barnacle is most closely related to? So I've got four options there. I've mentioned three of them already. Haven't mentioned crabs yet, but I've mentioned yeah, the lichens, the periwinkles, and the oysters already. So yeah, I'll give you a wee minute just to answer that. Okay, going thick and fast. Oh, oysters is getting a lot of attention there. Around 63% oysters. Ah, this is interesting. Okay. I thought I might throw you with the lichen one. So I might, just because they might look a bit similar, just with the way that they grow and the way they sort of encrust the boulders. Okay. Okay, so we've got 57% oysters. That is really interesting, and I can totally see where you're getting that from. They do look similar in the shell. But believe it or not, it is actually, oh, we've got a tie. I thought crabs was going to win it there, but crabs are actually the closest relation to a barnacle. So they're within the same family of crustacean. Um, which is weird because they're completely sedentary. They live their entire life on these rocks. And so it's a really strange connection and family connection that they have. A lot of people don't believe me when they say that. So I've managed to dupe you there, but that's great. So we'll move on to the midshore. So we're exposed to a wee bit more water now. So we can get a wee bit, again, a bit more biodiversity as there's more water available. So down in the midshore. So we've got slightly more less adapted to desiccation seaweeds here. We've got egg rack, so Ascophyllum nodosum. This is interesting species in that you can count if you count the bladders, so you can see the bladders in the photo here. Counting the bladders can give you an idea of how old the egg rack is. So some of these egg racks can get really, really, really long, and counting them can give you a really good idea as to how long that egg rack has been there. So interesting one. Next one is bladder rack. These are all brown seaweeds, and the bladder rack here you can see the bladders, and a lot of this seaweed here has two genders. So there will be female plants and there'll be male plants. And during the reproductive season, they'll get reproductive organs on the ends of the fronds. They're sort of go like an orangey kind of color, so you'll see them on the end of the fronds there. And then another animal that we find on the midshore is our limpets. So these again are quite well adapted to, pardon me, sorry, to desiccation. So they have what are called home scars. So they basically return to these home scars every night. And the suction between them and the rocks is really, really high. And it's obviously to avoid them losing moisture whenever they're exposed to the air. Some more midshore animals and plants that we get is a sea lettuce. So it kind of looks like it does what it says on the tin. Really does look like lettuce on the shore. Another one is gutweed. These are both green seaweeds. We get three different types of seaweed, actually, should have mentioned that. So we get brown seaweed, green seaweed, and red seaweed. So these are green seaweeds. And another species that we get on another animal that we get on the midshore is our flat periwinkles. So you can see this is our flat periwinkles. So we've had rough periwinkles and we have flat periwinkles. So these again are quite small, probably no bigger than a centimeter in diameter. And they've got this flattened spire, and they're usually this sort of yellow. They can be even brighter yellow color, canary yellow color than this. Um, so yeah, that's another species you find on the midshore. These are some more midshore animals. The one on the top left there, the sort of jelly looking like one, you've maybe seen a lot if you've been down the shore. These are beetlet anemones. So this is what they look like whenever they're in the water. You can see the sort of blue part or collar around the bottom if you look very closely at the where it meets the rock. These are nematocysts. And it's what they use. They're actually quite ferocious. They use these to attack other anemones and sting them and make them go away, basically. They're quite an interesting thing for seemingly looking so sedentary and looking a bit like a jelly baby whenever they're out of the water. Um, so that's our beetlet anemones, one of the most common anemones that you'll find on the rocky shore. Another one is our edible periwinkle, so Litorina litorea. So I've talked about rough periwinkles, I've talked about edible or flat periwinkles, and this is our edible periwinkle. So they are called edible periwinkles for a reason. There are people that go around and pick these guys. I don't know if I've ever tasted them myself. It's not my cup of tea, but if you're looking for them, that's what they look like. Next one is our dog whelk. These are, yeah, Nucella lapillus. Um, these again are actually quite a ferocious predator. These guys feed on and predate on some of the other creatures that I've mentioned here. So things like limpets. They actually have a mouth part called a radula that they use to basically bore holes into the shells of these other creatures. So the radula has a really, really tough, it's made out of a really, really tough material, and they'll basically just sit on top of the shells, the limpets, for days at a time, just etching away at the top of the shell, and then they're able to get inside and eat the insides. So they're really interesting intertidal predator, I guess. So you've got the dog whelk there. And these are actually its eggs. So if you ever see this on the shore, that's what it'll be. It'll be the dog whelk eggs. So keep an eye out for those. And then lastly, we've got the flat top shell, so Sturmafla imballisalis. And you get a few different types of top shell. This is the flat top shell. You also get grey top shells and you get purple top shells. And this is what you're looking at or looking for whenever you find them on the shore. Um, Next up, and arguably for some people the most interesting is the low shore. So this is obviously where the creatures and the habitat is more covered by the water for more of the time. Means that more things can live here. So some of the things that we find on the low shore are serrated wrack. You can see that there, another brown seaweed. You can see all of the periwinkles attached to that as well. So this is really great habitat. The racks and the seaweeds really great habitats for other things as well. So worth having a wee look in through them. We also get our crab. So this is our first example of our crab here. So this is our edible crab. Again, edible for that reason, in that this is the one you get on your dinner, get for your dinner in a restaurant. This guy's probably a little bit small, but you find a lot of these, especially under boulders and things in the lower shore. And then this guy as well. So this is not that the beetle anemone was our first anemone, but this is our second. So this is a snake lox anemone. And I put him here on the low shore because uh, unlike the beetle anemone that we saw was kind of looked like a jelly baby whenever he was out of the water, this guy can't retract his tentacles. So they tend to live further in the low shore or in rock pools that are always full of water, because they can't retract their tentacles, so they're more likely to be desiccated whenever if they're exposed to the air. So these are just some more creatures that you can find under boulders and stones on the low shore. So another crab species here. We've got our broad-clawed porcelain crab. We're going to see him again in a wee minute. We took a picture of him, so I'm going to try and upload observation for you whenever I do a little demonstration of iNaturalist for you. So this is a broad-clawed porcelain crab. This is a long-clawed porcelain crab. Um, we've got green sea urchin, tiny cushion star. So these are very tiny. These can be like the size of your fingernail, very, 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 or your baby, your pinky fingernail. They're very, very tiny. And then brittle stars as well. So these are really cool to find as well. Like you get really, really tiny ones on the low shore, but you can end up with ones maybe a few centimeters in diameter. They're a really good, cool thing to look out for on the low shore. Cowries as well. Again, these are very, very small. If you're familiar with the word cowrie, you're probably familiar with maybe the tropical versions of these guys, the ones that people get in their bathrooms and they're sitting as an ornament. Those ones come from a lot more tropical climes than ours. The cowries that we get here, again, are only maybe the size of your fingertip. They're very, very small. So you have to be keeping your eye out to find these guys. And one of our fish species that you can maybe find under the rocks and boulders are shanies. So we've got a few other ones as well. You can get blennies, you get butterfish, and different things like that. So keep an eye out for those. So I've talked a bit about some of the species and the different intertidal zones, but how do we carry out a survey? What's the best way to go about carrying out a ShoreNI survey? Um, Arrive 1 hour before low water. So this is to give you time to get to the low water mark and go back, make your way back up the shore while the tide is out, to just for your safety and to ensure that you're seeing everything that you can at the low water mark. So you start at the low shore, spend about 15 minutes looking around the low shore water mark, then 15 minutes in the midshore, and then 15 minutes in the high shore. So try to spend about 45 minutes to an hour doing your survey and taking pictures as you go. So you can upload and try to identify your photos on iNaturalist. So I'll give you some tips, hints and tips on taking photos and what you're looking at whenever you're on the shore. So when you look at this at first, you think, oh, there's not a lot going on here, or there's just sort of gunk on this boulder here. But if you look closer, there's a few different species here. So we've got some sponge species. We've actually got, I think we've got a brittle star in the middle of the picture there. It's very hard to see. I wonder if I could even, yeah, I'll use my little laser pointer pen. You can see the brittle star just here, just really, really well camouflaged. But you've got keelworms here as well, so that's another species. This is a type of sponge, maybe like a breadcrumb sponge. You've got yeah, you've got different species here again. So and then there's spiral spororbus worms here as well. So there's a lot going on here. It just takes you a wee minute to get your eye into it. Some things are very, very small. So this is a slit limpet, like our other limpets, but he's only 8 millimeters wide or in diameter. He's very, 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 very tiny, and you can tell that by the spororbus worms here. So in that previous picture, that this is the spororbus that I am circling here, in comparison to the keel worms and to the brittle star. They're very, very tiny. And then this slit limpet is minuscule. Look at it in comparison to that size. So again, just keep getting your eye in and seeing everything there is to see. Yeah, your eyes tend to see what is moving, but you can have a look and see if you can see anything else on this rock. So the first thing we obviously see there is our brittle star moving around, but there's definitely other things here. So like I said, there's spororbus worms there, the white curly ones. So these guys here. We've also got the keel worms again. And then we're actually coming across, I think we're coming across a sea urchin. So the brittle star is coming towards a sea urchin here. So you can see it, there's a rock on top of him here, but this is a sea urchin. Um, doesn't move quite as quickly as our brittle star, but he's still there and worth taking a look at. So some hints and tips for taking our photos. So get up close to your subject and try to make the subject as big as possible. So it's quite obvious from this photo that this is the specimen that we're looking at. So this is actually a bloody Henry starfish. Excuse my language, but that's his name. And not the sponge here. So this is the focus. This is the subject that we want to be identifying here. So this is a great photo of this one here. So some of the most important things whenever you're taking your photos is to make sure we know where you took your photo. So on our different devices, it's important that you let your camera have access to your location services. So on your iPhone, open your phone setting up, tap privacy, and at the top you can turn your location services on. That's for your iPhone. And then for your camera, you can tick while using the app that you're allowed to use your location services. So this means that we'll get a GPS coordinates every time you take your photo, so we know exactly where you found that species. And it means it's a lot easier whenever you upload these things onto iNaturalist, because it'll just populate it itself. You don't need to worry about taking GPS coordinates or anything like that. Your phone will have done it, and then the computer or the app will be able to tell exactly where you found that species. So it is a case of just taking a nice picture and putting it on the app or uploading it onto the website. On Android, maybe slightly more complicated, but it's the same method. You open your phone security settings app, tap location or security and location in the main menu, tap location under the privacy heading, tap mode, and tap the option you want. So high accuracy. So I have this on my phone where it's to the very point that where you are. So um, that is the way you want to get this. And again, making sure that your camera has access to your location as well. So if you go into your apps in your Android phone, your Samsung phone, you'll be able to tell the app that it has access to your location. Um, that one up. Yeah, so this is what it'll look like on an Android. So you go into your biometrics and security, location on, and then you're in You can do app permissions then to let it use your location. Um, so a really important part of our surveying is obviously tide times. So I mentioned that try to get down and do a survey 1 hour before low tide. But you have to know when the low tide is. And so these are some of the best websites to use to try and figure out when you should be going down to your local shore, or going down to wherever you're trying to do your survey. So twice a month at the new moon and full moon, we have spring tides. So during these spring tides, we have a greater tidal range, and this is the best time for shore surveys as the tide goes out further, and we can explore more of the low shore. So you get a bit longer to see the higher biodiversity on the low shore. Um, so information on these tide times can be found at tidetimes.co.uk, Belfast Tide Times, tides dash willy weather, or tidesforfishing.com is a reliable one as well. You can also, if you, this is an iPhone, so there's a few different apps that you can use as well. So My Tide Times is one that people would use on the iPhone or from the App Store. So this would give you Tide Times as well. And this is what it looks like in app. So you would click on one of the pins, and it would give you the Tide Times for that day, and you can search in for ones in the future as well. So you can see here that Strangford had a 3.5 meter high tide and a 0.5 meter low tide at 10 a.m. So it's really useful, that one there. So using iNaturalist, so the next step to taking your photos is uploading your records onto iNaturalist. So you can do this with the app. So there's an iNaturalist app that you can download for free on the App Store or Google Play. Works on all your devices, and you just sign up and away you go. And I will try to share my screen here and take you through what it looks like whenever you go onto the website. So let me see if I can get this to work. Okay. Can everybody see my screen there, or is I? Oh wait, no, never mind. There we go. So can everybody see my um screen there? Nick, can you see that okay?
Yep, that's
Yeah,
perfect.
perfect. Okay, great. So I'm just going to go into Google here, and I'm going to type in iNaturalist. So yeah, that's come up already. So go into iNaturalist. And it's the first one here. So iNaturalist, a community for naturalists. So click into this. This is what comes up for me. So I'll sign out here and show you what it looks like when you go into the first page. So this is what it looks like in the first place. So you can go here to sign up. You just put your email, pick a username, pick a password confirmation, and then click I am not a robot. And then you can put your consents here. Whether you want to agree, if you agree to their terms of service and how they use your pictures and things like that. So that's what it looks like in the first place. It'll probably ask you to verify your email address, but this is the sign up sheet here. So I'll take you quickly into what it looks like to put an observation into iNaturalist. So I'll log in here. So that was my username and my password. And this is what the page looks like whenever you first go into it. So you've got your home page. I've got my profile up here. If I go into my profile, you can tell the people of iNaturalist a bit about yourself. So I put in here that I'm a marine engagement officer at Ulster Wildlife, interest in citizen science or something like that. So we put that in there. Um, and one of the ways that you can put in observations, I'm giving myself away here, but I currently don't have any at the moment. But you can go up to this green button up here to upload a observation. So I'll choose a file. So I'm going to choose, I said we would come back to my broad-clawed porcelain crab. And you can see here that this is my crab. So it's very similar to that one that I was showing you earlier. But a good thing about iNaturalist is it actually has an AI function. So it can give me some ideas as to what this species is, which is really, really useful if you're not quite sure what it is. If you're not an expert, it doesn't matter. This AI is pretty good, but it's also verified by other people on iNaturalist as well. So if the photo's good enough and the ID is verified by two people, it can become research grade. And then the data can be used by people like DERA, by people like CEDAR, and that data can be fed in and used for decision making, which is really, really great. So I know that this is actually it's a broad-clawed porcelain crab, but the other name for it is a hairy porcelain crab, so the Latin name is correct here. So I'll click this one. Um, I found this one in Belfast, or in Bangor rather, sorry, in round Ballyhome. Um, will not worry about I think that date is correct. This'll have populated from my phone, as well as the GPS data as well. And the only other most important thing I'll put in here is the field. So one of the most important thing for making this a good bit of data is to ensure that we have what's called abundance data. So if I put abundance in here, um, you can get different types of abundance data. So we'll put in this one here. So AC4 is a good area of abundance, or a good count of abundance. So it stands for abundant, common, frequent, occasional, rare, or unknown. So we'll put common for this one here. So I'll add this. So that's one of the fields to put in. And then you can also add the project. So I've been talking about ShoreNI. Um, um, and you can add your project in as well. If I had this, I think I added to this as well. So that would be what my observation would look like. And then I would submit this, but I'll not submit this for now. But yeah, that's that. That's a very whistle-stop tour of what iNaturalist looks like. And again, back to the home page here. If you ever want to use it, that's what it looks like. I'll go back to my PowerPoint slide here. So yeah, that is what this looks like. And yeah, a very, very whistle stop tour of some of the things that you can see if you do a survey, a way to upload it to iNaturalist, but it's a way that you can contribute to science. So every observation can contribute to biodiversity science, from the rarest fish to the most common seaweed. iNaturalist shares your findings with scientific data repositories like the Global Biodiversity Information Facility, and your records will also be shared with CEDAR in Northern Ireland and the NBN Atlas, and your personnel data will not be shared. So you're contributing to science in a very real way with this. So I'm going to just end on this one here. The seashore code. So this is really, really important whenever you're going down to the shore, is to always put things back where you found them. So always put boulders, stones, and seaweed back to how you found them. Avoid trampling seaweeds and animals as much as possible. Put animals back where you found them. Handle animals with care and with wet hands. If you place animals in a bucket or tub for viewing/photography, change the water regularly to avoid overheating, and leave no trace. So take your litter home. So I'll leave you with this little picture of a green sea urchin that we found on Bangor in Bangor. So thank you very much. I'll take some questions if anybody has any.
Super. Great stuff, Tori. We've got a question waiting, so I'll ask this first whilst folks can type away in the chat and add some questions in if they have some. But the first one was back from the sea urchin that was shown. How would the sea urchin be okay with that rock on them?
Some sea urchins actually do that on purpose. So you can see the one in the picture here also has stuff attached to him. So they actually do this as like a bit of a camouflage. There's some that are more adept at it than others. But yeah, they do this. They sort of like pull things on top of them, and it's just it's almost like an armor. It's a good way of camouflaging themselves. So the way they're looking at that video, it looks like that sea urchin has done it themselves. It doesn't look like it's fallen on top of him or anything like that, or that he's stuck. It looks like he has pulled that little rock onto him himself. But yeah, that's a great question.
Okay, we've got another question through from Beverly here. Do you need photos of everything you record? I'm thinking that it could be very time consuming to take and then upload all of the photos.
Yeah, I understand. It's one of the best ways to verify what you're seeing. So one of the things about the citizen science, having a video, a picture tells a thousand words. It's so much easier to know exactly what you're looking at. If you're a beginner, you can take you would hope that you would take an expert's word for it, that that's what you're seeing whenever they go down to the shore. They're just counting them. They're just like, oh, I saw 10 flat edible periwinkles, I saw 20 flat periwinkles, and you take their word for it because they are the expert in the field. But when it comes to citizen science, I want this to be accessible. You want people's data and you want people's effort to still be worthwhile. And the one of the best ways to do that is to take pictures so that we know that what they're saying it is. So unfortunately, yeah, taking pictures is probably the best way and the easiest way. But the app makes it that wee bit easier, in that you can just do it as you go. Um, you taking but I do understand that it probably would be a bit time consuming doing everything, but you just do as much as possible, and every bit of data, every data point is valuable. But yeah, getting really good pictures of things just so that it can be validated very quickly. That's the benefit of iNaturalist is that it can be sort of verified in real time whenever you put things into other recording sites like I record or something like that, it can take a very, very long time for things to get verified because it's a handful, or it's volunteers and a handful of experts that have to verify those records, whereas the iNaturalist is verified, it's sort of group verified, and it's still very, very reliable. But it makes it that wee bit quicker, and that's one of the benefits of iNaturalist and uploading those photos is you get the data verified and research grade very, very quickly. But yeah, no, that's a great question. Thank you. We can take sort of if anybody wants to say their question as well, but if we've got more written questions, we'll take those too.
We've got another one here. Seen Once saw an animal, a transparent animal creature that looked like a shrimp up in Donegal in a rock pool. Is it? Could you tell? Could you be able to tell what type it would be? I think is the question.
Yeah. Yeah, so there will be a type of shrimp. There's a few different species that we get. And if you took a picture, like I'm fairly certain that if you uploaded to iNaturalist, we'd know exactly what it was finding. I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I can't think off the top of my head like what different species there are. There's like we get like ghost shrimp and you get common shrimp. There's lots of different, or a few different types, or different species of them.
Yeah.
But it probably was a shrimp species that you saw. And if you got a good enough picture of it, I'm sure we would be able to identify it. So yeah, we find those on a lot of rocky shores,
Yeah.
yeah, in those rock pools and stuff like that. So yeah.
Yeah. I've got another question about the bars on the side on the slide for the shore bands. So they were the
Oh yeah.
different shore bands, and then I think
Oh
it was
yeah.
the bars that were on there.
Yeah, so that was sort of, I think it was sort of illustrating my what I was kind of talking about. So let me go back, go all the way back to the start here. Um,
I think yeah, it was talking about the kind of um, environmental conditions and stuff. As you go up the shore, it's drier. As you go down the shore, it's
yeah, there we go.
except other thing,
There we
temperature.
go.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was sort of illustrating my point here. So the bars, if we start from the left-hand side, we've got temperature variation. So obviously if you're exposed to water or if you're exposed to the sun and out of the water for longer length of time, you're exposed to higher variations of temperature. So if you're inundated with water or you're in the water, it's a more constant temperature. But obviously, being out of the water, you have to be able to deal with that and being baked by the sun, but then also still being covered by water sometimes. So yeah, the temperature variation really changes as you go up the shore. Salinity variation again, so it obviously becomes less saline as you go up the shore because there's less water, there's less tides coming in. Time exposed to air, so low to high, time exposed to air as you go up the shore. Competition. So I mentioned there, it's lower on the high shore, and that's because they have to be a lot more highly adapted on the higher shore, and less things are. So it's better to be highly adapted because that's the trade-off is there's less competition at the higher points of the shore in comparison to the lower parts of the shore. So there's more biodiversity and so more competition. And then again, self-explanatory there with the low to high amount of sunlight as well, because you're exposed to the sunlight a bit more, which is a bit more relevant for maybe the seaweeds and things like that. So yeah, no, great question. Thank you so much.
Yeah. That was a good question. That's good. I've seen a one about the iNaturalist app wanting consent to personal info to be transferred to the USA.
Yeah.
Um, I just did a quick Google on iNaturalist, and it is a USA based company. Well, non-profit. So it's an if you've seen that it's a .org, so it's actually a non-profit based in the USA. So that'll be why it's wanting the personal info to be transferred there. Um, I think.
Yeah, I imagine so. And I don't know whether it probably still works if you don't do that. Like some of those things, I don't know if they're compulsory. I know that there's one that's a terms and condition one that is. But the other three I don't think are compulsory. There's a few like that you can opt in and out of. So that one might not be compulsory. But yeah, that's the reason why it's asking you. It's not because they're stealing your information or anything like that. They're not gonna sell it to Amazon or something. So that's the only reason that that's there. But yeah, very valid question. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, just doesn't seem compulsory, but yeah, I'd say don't consent to anything you don't agree to. Um,
Yeah.
but the USA part's not surprising, as that's where they're based. Um, and maybe we've got time for one final quick question. Was
Yeah.
about dog whelks.
Okay.
Um, if they've seen an empty dog whelk shell with a hole in it, is
Yeah.
there anything that would predate on dog whelks.
Imagine other dog whelks,
Yeah.
especially if it's a very perfect round hole. So that's actually how you really tell whether a dog whelk has eaten something else with a shell. It'll be like an absolutely perfect round hole. It almost looks like someone's drilled it for jewelry. I think that's where a lot of people actually, they go beachcombing and they find these shells and put them on a necklace, and it's actually not human made. It's made by these dog whelks, but they're predatory, and I imagine they're cannibalistic as well. So it's potentially been another dog whelk that's predated on that one. So yeah, it's a good spot, that one.
Mhm. Yeah. Right. I think we're a little bit past time, so we should
Yeah,
probably
I'll
wrap.
just yeah just end on our some of the talks that we've got coming up. So if anybody's interested in some of the other winter talks, we've got some of them coming up. If I can just get to the end of my slides here, that would be great. Slides, far too many slides. Okay, so sorry. There's our upcoming winter talks. On the 6th of February, we've got Brendan Gormley, and he's going to be talking about the bog, an archaeological bank. On Wednesday the 12th, we've got Robert Rosell. He's going to be talking about the fish of Loch Ness, so it should be an interesting one, wildlife, ecosystem, and resource. Wednesday the 19th of February, the Peatlands team from Ulster Wildlife are going to be talking about high-tech nature conservation. So looking at
Yeah.
all the tech involved.
And that
And
might
of course,
include some of our marine tech as well in that talk.
yeah, they're going to be talking about the ROVs and stuff like that. So that'll be a good one. Unfortunately, the one on the 26th is fully booked. But that should be an interesting one, the magic of the Irish rainforest. Um, I think, sorry, there's some more ones that are coming up as well. So that was 26th of February. Wednesday, the 5th of March, Karen Healy from the NI Bat Group. Bats, Fascinating Creatures of the Night. So we've got that one too. Wednesday, the 12th of March, Maureen Carville from Ulster Wildlife will be doing the Helping Hedgehogs, How to Let Nature In. Wednesday, the 19th of March, Rosemary Mulholland, Head of Nature Recovery at Ulster Wildlife, will be doing a talk about creating a butterfly-friendly garden. So lots to look forward to. And thank you all so much for coming to our talk. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you have any more questions or you want to get involved with ShoreNI, please reach out to me. You can find me on Ulster Wildlife's website. And my email address is tori.moore@ulsterwildlife.org. But thanks again, everybody, and have a great evening. And we'll talk to you again later. Thank you.